Welcome back to Small Caps. My name's Kerry Stevenson, and today, delighted to be bringing you Andy Buxton, Managing Director of Alice Queen. Now, they've been flying a little bit under the radar, but I'm telling you, had an announcement out today, got some really good, interesting projects. Two projects, ladies and gentlemen, New South Wales, Far North Queensland. We're going to start in Far North Queensland. Andy Buxton, welcome to Small Caps.
Thank you, Kerry. Yeah, great pleasure to be here. Good level of energy already.
Well, mate, that's because I just think you've been working behind the scenes, quietly developing two really exciting projects. And, you know, I always say to people, you've got to do your own research. But the reason I love to bring stories like this on is because you've done the hard yards, and now is when it starts to get exciting. So let's talk a little bit about Alice Queen. Now, the ASX code for all of you guys out there, because I know you like it, AQX. Andy, let's talk about the Far North Queensland project, Horn Island, and all the history of that and where you're at today.
Yeah, okay. Well, thanks, Kerry. Yeah, look, it's a great introduction that you've just given, because it has been quite a long time in bringing this project to fruition. I think we started about 2012. So what's that, 8 years already? And yeah, look, it has been a bit of a long story, but one that I love to tell because it's got some real elements that I think a lot of people don't understand. And look, it started really with a position that we found ourselves in, trying to find a new project for a company that we just set up. And we were the underbidder in a small gold mine on Cape York called the Alice River Gold Mine. And you probably get a hint there. That's where the name actually originated, which I know is going to be one of your questions somewhere along the way.
It was actually. Yeah. I also want to say, you know, Horn Island, Far North Queensland. Actually, where is it? Where is it?
Okay, yeah, all right, good question. So, Horn Island is part of the Torres Strait Island group. So there's 300 islands just off the tip of Cape York. So literally sitting, in between the tip of Cape York and New Guinea. It's a place that not many Australians know really well, but most Australians have heard of, the Torres Strait Islands. Remarkably, it has its own flag, as you would see most council offices and government buildings. It's Australia's third flag, so it's got a real history of intrigue, I think, for most people. 300 islands, 17 of which are inhabited by Aboriginal communities in the main part, but the centre of the action up there is Thursday Island, again, which most of your viewers will have heard of. Thursday Island's actually quite a big town. It's 3,000 people. So 3 pubs, not that we take too much notice of that. A couple of supermarkets. It's got all the things that a typical country town in Australia would have. Its population's sort of split 50-50 between Aboriginal people and white people, and it's got a really special place in Australia because it's Australia's northernmost outpost. And again, most of your viewers may not know that, but on that basis, Kerry, it's heavily funded by government in terms of border force, army, navy, etc. And not only that, Thursday Island serves as the administrative hub for 17 remote communities. So 17 of those 300 islands are populated, effectively by Aboriginal people who actually come from that place. And the other twist on this. Yeah, sorry
to cut you, Andy. So how did you come to be getting a project up on Horn Island? Because it's not like, Kalgoorlie or the centre of New South Wales. What was the reasoning behind this, and how did you find it?
I'm going to incriminate myself straight away here, but it's a really good question. And I mentioned the Alice River gold mine opportunity. We were the underbidder. We missed out on that one. But my partner, Dale McCabe, partner in business, that is, not my partner in life, Fiona, sorry about that. We're very, very keen fishermen. Dale and I are very keen fly fishermen, also pig hunters, etc. And when I said to Dale, we're going to set up a new project, we kind of looked at the map and went, well, where's the great place for fishing and hunting? And let's find a project there. And so we sat down and spent many weeks poring over the QDEX government website, which is, as your viewers will know, the government website for mining in Queensland, and looked at the map, and I kind of looked up to Cape York, and we found a little filter on that system which shows historic gold showings. They're not mines, but gold showings. And this little place called Horn Island lit up like a Christmas tree of gold showings. I said to Dale, that's where we've got to go. That looks like the place. And cutting a long story short, we did the investigative work, and I engaged my then technical director, John Holliday, who will feature later in this story, as you know. And he said, mate, that looks fantastic. The geology looks great. It's a previously operating mine. Let's go and peg it. And so I rang the guy at the Queensland Mines Department and said, I'm Andy Buxton, I'd like to peg Horn Island. And he almost fell off the back of his chair laughing at me saying, yeah, right, mate. You want to peg Horn Island? Yeah, you and everyone else. For 20 years, people have been trying to do this. There's a couple of things you may not know. The main one of which is the mine that operated there in the 80s went hopelessly broke and hopelessly did the wrong thing by the local Aboriginal people. Environmentally, they were just a bunch of scallywags, basically. And as a consequence, the government of Queensland has banned mining and exploration forever, indefinitely. It was called Restriction Agreement 295, and it was a moratorium that precluded any future mining on that place forever.
Wow.
So it was after a number of months, Kerry, sorry to bang on, but it's such a great story. After a number of months of convincing John Holliday, who's absolutely almost unconvincible with any of these things, he basically said, mate, this is so good. So what's the problem? And I said, well, it's got a government moratorium over it, and we would need to lift that, and it's an act of parliament. How are we going to do it? And the guy at the Queensland government basically said, you're not going to be able to do it, because almost immediately after the mine went broke, the Aboriginal guys on Horn Island effectively won native title. And so you've got native title and you've got a government restriction. You'll never be going to Horn Island ever again. Anyway, so cutting a long story short, we just thought logically about the system, and if you can put we basically said to ourselves, Kerry, if you can put a moratorium to preclude it, then you could probably take it off. There must be a way. And after severe lobbying of the Queensland government, they eventually decided, well, yeah, maybe you can. Here are the steps. But the first and the most important step is you've got to convince the Aboriginal community that's a good idea.
Yeah.
And so that's where we started in 2012. We basically, it was me in the initial stages on my own. We travelled up there every month and sat down with the elders of the Cowreg Aboriginal tribe and basically said, look, we're not the same guys. This is a whole generation now that's passed. We can do this better. We can do it properly. And, if we get it right, there's an enormous benefit for the community here. There's jobs, there's probably some dividends if we get the mine up and running. And there's a sense of pride that would come from your people if we could actually reinstate this thing. And that message eventually got through. And together with the Aboriginal group, the Cowreg boys, we went collectively, we set up a company together with them, and we went collectively back to the Queensland government. And as you'd imagine, they couldn't believe it. They said, that's extraordinary. And on that basis that you've got these guys on board, the local landowners, we'll give you a go. And so that's really how it all started. Yeah.
How long did that take, Andy?
That was pretty much 3 years. Yeah, we started late in 2011, and we were granted the permit, I think, 2014 in December. So 3 years.
3 years. Okay. And are they part of Alice Queen, the company, or is there a separate company with the Aboriginal people on Horn Island?
Yes, there's a separate company. So it's a subsidiary of Alice Queen. Its name is Cowroo Gold, and again, Cowroo is the Aboriginal term for this particular tribe. They're the Cowreg people, the people of the Kookaburra. So the term means Kookaburra, and Kookaburra is their spiritual totem. And so we named the company after, to give it the spiritual context for them, Cowroo Gold, which means all the Kookaburras. Cowroo is the plural word. And yeah, we effectively gave them a 7.5% free carried interest in that company, right through to production if we were successful. And so, yeah, so they still hold a good chunk of the equity in the company, and yeah, so far so good. We're getting there.
Okay, so so that's great, and good on you. And here's the thing, isn't it, Andy? There is always a way to get things done. You've just got to think a little bit differently. And I think more importantly it is about community. As mining people, we can't go in and ride roughshod. And as you said before, history shows doesn't work and creates a lot of challenges, but you've overcome those challenges. So where are you at with this project today? Because I know when we were talking off camera, you're pretty excited about Horn Island. And the fact of the matter is no one has been able to do anything since the 80s.
Yeah, that's right. Well, it's quite a bit of a quite a bit of a way from where we started, but it's a good question. I could almost go backwards a little bit here. The recent really big news for us, Kerry, was that we got a lot of interest from the majors eventually, and one of the majors that sort of popped their head up was St Barbara. St Barbara Limited, again, your viewers will know them. They're, I think, got a market cap of around 2.5, 3 billion, something like that. Interestingly for us, that was a real game changer because as a small company, as again, well, you can do a lot of drilling, you can get some good results, but eventually, unless you make a really big discovery, you do run out of a little bit of steam. So there's a point at which you have to be, somewhat prudent and logical about what you do next. And that came to us about 2 years ago. And cutting a long story short, St Barbara was the front runner of 2 or 3 very big companies that were interested in Horn Island. And so that was a really big deal for us. And, look, we did our own drilling. We built up a resource of about 500,000 ounces, which is not bad, all open pittable up there, in and around the old mine. And St Barbara have come in with, some much bigger money, some real experience on the ground at operating mines. They've got 3 mines that they operate around the world. And they're really supporting the idea of a much bigger project. So they're doing some deeper drilling as we speak. And the idea is that if they find what they want to find, we'll have effectively a share of a much bigger operation.
And what is that?
So
Andy, what's the deal with St Barbara? How does that work out for shareholders of Alice Queen?
Yeah, it's a good question. So the idea is that one of the key things that we did, Kerry, was when we had the approach from them, we carved out of the JV discussions all of the work that we'd done up to that point. So in other words, we kept all of the work and all the resource that we developed for ourselves out of the JV. And we literally just farmed out the upside to anything further that they could find. So the idea is that, the deal basically is they spend 4 million over 3 years to earn 70% of everything outside of what we already had. So it's kind of the best of the both worlds arrangement. And then the point at which they spend the 4 million, which will probably be about 1.5 years from now on current trend, then they have the option to buy back the stuff that they didn't get in the first place at fair value. And so we're kind of running a parallel operation here where we're still developing our resource through from inferred resource into indicated, and hopefully beyond that to BFS, so that when and if they do come knocking and say, okay, we've found another 1 million ounces next door here, we'd like to buy all of your existing stuff back, that we can demonstrate the maximum value possible for our shareholders.
And when you're talking about, you said earlier that it's open pittable. Are we talking, what sort of grades are you talking about?
It's just under 2 grams. Yeah, so it's 500,000 ounces at 1.9 grams, contained in about 8 million tonnes of rock.
And do you think there's any high-grade shoots off that? Is that what St Barbara are looking at? Because you said earlier when you first went up there and John Holliday said, it's lit up and there's so much more to this. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, there really is a huge opportunity here. I mean, it's a good question again, because when we first went in there, the old saying that a lot of people will have heard in this part of the industry, the best place to find gold is at a gold mine. And that's more or less what Doc Holliday said to me. He said, mate, we don't really need too much here. We know the gold's there. We know the last guys didn't finish their mining, so there's an unmined reserve sitting there. So let's, in simple terms, drill in and around and underneath the old pit, because we know the gold's there. And he was right. So that's where the 500,000 ounces comes from. St Barbara have taken a little bit more of a technical and, I think, systematic view to it. So that with them, we've done significant amounts of, ground geochem and a significant IP study late last year that's formed the basis of the new targets, deeper targets, bigger targets that they're currently drilling. It's and then beyond, look, that's still in and around the old pit. Beyond that, we've got another second prospect called Southern Silicified Ridge, where a couple of years ago we drilled 11 meters. I think the headline number there was 11 meters at 3 grams. Not to be sneezed at, right? So there's a whole second deposit about 1 kilometre south that we're looking at doing with St Barbara in due course. And then beyond that, without getting too carried away, there's another 5 islands that comprise our second license up there, which we've called Kowalagal. So you've got 2 permits, Horn Island and Kowalagal, which is, just so you know, the Aboriginal name for their island group, the southern group of the Torres Strait. Kowalagal stretches across 5 islands, including the biggest island in the Torres Strait, which is Muralag, Aboriginal term for Prince of Wales Island. So on all of those islands, yes, there's the Christmas tree to which I referred earlier. Those Christmas bulbs, if you like, or those Christmas lights are actually shining on all of the islands. So there's historic pits and shafts and showings on all 5 of those islands. So it's one of those ones where...
Andy, when you say island, I always think, well, how the heck do you get there? And I don't want to spend our whole time on here because I want to also talk about Boda East, but how do you get to Horn Island, number 1? And number 2, has COVID impacted the operations at all?
Good. I'll do the second one first. The answer is COVID really hasn't affected us at all. And that's for the reason that we've always had Queensland geological teams that service Horn Island. So internally in Queensland, it hasn't made any impact whatsoever. There was a small impact with our chief geologist, who's a Melbourne guy. He was very magnanimous and spent 2 weeks in quarantine in Cairns earlier in the year to get back up there. And then St Barbara's crew, they're either Western Australia or North Queensland. So really it hasn't impacted us at all. The only impact is, of course, that Dale, the other executive director, and I can't get there, which is only an impact, on the basis that, as we said earlier, those relationships with the Aborigines are so important, and nothing beats time on the ground and face-to-face looking these guys in the eye, letting them look you in the eye to make sure that they're happy with what we're doing.
Yeah, and there's a trust factor there as well. So it sounds to me like one of the most important things is to give jobs and security and, I guess, potentially generational wealth to the local people up there.
That's exactly right. Yeah. And look, Adrian Hell, our chief geo up there, he's done a remarkable job as well at not only, sort of picking up where Dale and I left off, but really enhancing that relationship. It's just a little twist to the story, but Dale, Adrian and I all have Aboriginal names granted to us by the elders up there. So only 3 of us that have I'm not saying achieved that, because you don't go knocking for these things. They have to come to you. Yeah. And so we're very proud of that part of that relationship. But Adrian Tabu, just so you know, is his name, which means big brown snake. He kind of likes that one. He's just doing a fantastic job. So yeah, he's up there at the moment, obviously managing both our part of the project and also managing St Barbara's component on the ground as well.
Okay, well, we're going to have to finish up in 2 seconds. How do you get to Horn Island really quick? I want to get to Boda East.
Yeah, no worries. All right, so it's a really simple answer. Melbourne to Cairns, direct flight. Hour changeover, then you get on a Qantas link flight, Cairns to Horn Island, 90 minutes. And then you get off the plane, and our mine site is 3 kilometres from the airport of Horn Island.
Perfect. So it's not difficult, guys. It's not difficult.
Easy.
Andy, I really want, because you've got 2 really exciting projects. Boda East, back down here in New South Wales. Now, you've mentioned John Holliday. Let's talk about John, because he's got a bit of history with New South Wales, hasn't he?
He sure does.
And what's his relationship with Alice Queen?
Good. Okay. Well, look, in 2011, I just recently left my prior company, and I tried to get John onto the board of that company. And he basically said, mate, you don't know what you're talking about. This other company's never going to work, but he said, I kind of like you. And so if you can get this first one, was Kidman Resources up and running, then come back and see me when you're ready to do another one. And I'll join the board on the second one, just because I need to know that you know what you're talking about. And in the end, I'm pretty sure he thought when he met me, I'll never see this bloke again. Anyway, we got Kidman up and running. That was good. And then I gave him a ring and said, would you join our this new board, Alice Queen? And he said, yeah, okay, well, I'll look at it if you can find a good project, which became Horn Island. That's how he joined. However, thanks for asking the question. He then said, Kerry, after he saw Horn Island and saw the potential of that project, he basically came knocking on my door one day, this is about a year or 2 in, and said, you know what? He said, just for the viewers' sake, John's claim to fame is he discovered Cadia Ridgeway, which became a Newcrest, Newcrest operating mine. It's probably still the most profitable gold mine in Australia. It's 50 million ounces of gold, global resource, and 9 million tons of copper. So it's a big deal. That's why I chased him in the first place, by the way.
And he discovered that.
He discovered it, yeah. Yeah, he and a couple of other guys. He doesn't ever like me saying he discovered it on his own. There's a team that was part of that, as you know. And he's pretty modest about it, but that's the sort of street cred that you need when you're a young fellow like me trying to start a company with no real background in mining. And he really was the game changer in everything that we've done with Alice Queen. He's been really good. Technically, to answer your question, he is the chief technical advisor. He's still a major shareholder with a couple of percent, I believe, off the top of my head. And he oversees everything that we do, both in New South Wales, still in Queensland to a fair extent with Adrian, and also, without saying too much, a pretty active pipeline of new prospects that we're considering. In terms of what happened with New South Wales, just to get myself back on track, because I really am bang on here. You're good at this. You're good at getting the best out of it. He came knocking one day and said, look, I like this team that you put together. I like you. I like the whole idea of Horn Islands. Really, it's making me feel good because he was in semi-retirement. He said, look, I'd kind of like to get back into it. And just so you know, there's been an idea literally burning a hole in my pocket ever since I left Newcrest. And it was something like this, Kerry. He said, look, after discovering Cadia in 1991, he said, every explorer from not only Australia, but everywhere in the world converged on this place and trying to find the next one. And, as I think I've mentioned to a few people recently, I would have seen 100 small cap presentations where the headline is this the next Cadia? Well, it's a fair point. Everyone's still trying to find it. But John's comment was pretty simple. He said, you got to trust me on one thing, Andy. You're never going to find another Cadia in the southern part of the Molong volcanic belt because it's been explored to within an inch of its life, including from me. But he said the one thing that's burning a hole in my pocket is that if you head north along the structure, the Molong volcanic belt runs for at least 200 or 300 km north. And about halfway along, the basement rocks, the Ordovician basement rocks, the ones that host Cadia, go under a cover sequence. And what that means is that effectively no one's explored it. And the reason they haven't is because it's expensive. It's gutsy, wildcat, deep drilling, expensive stuff for a little company. Do you want to have a crack? And I went, I'd love to have a go at that. That sounds like the perfect thing for us. So he goes, right, well, we have to, he said, I'm going to be relying on you guys to raise the money. I can do the geophysics and the targeting and all that sort of stuff, but we're going to need some big money to do it. But, he said, absolutely certain in my mind is that I know there's not another Cadia in that southern part, but I'm almost certain there'll be another one in the northern part if we can just find it and just drill through that cover. And so, that's how we started. We then, remarkably managed to get some of the best ground in that northern part undercover. And that story, notwithstanding, I still believe it sounds like a great story. You've got the best guy in the business, the best ground on the structure. Still didn't really resonate because of that concern that we wouldn't have enough money to do it. 2 or 3 years later, Kerry, lo and behold, the guy's right next door to our southernmost tenement, Yarranduri.
Ah, yes, I know who you're going to talk about. Yep. Yeah.
So Alkane Resources come out with, effectively a kilometre at 0.5 gram gold. So I mean that was a line of a discovery, and that really switched the lights on to a story that we feel we've been telling probably for 2 or 3 years prior. So while we're not complaining, it was a little frustrating, but now all the lights have gone on into that little area around Wellington, around in the transition zone between where the Ordovician rocks are outcropping and where it goes undercover. It's right at that junction. So the southernmost portion of what John talked about to me probably 6 years earlier. And now, of course, everyone's behind us. We've managed to raise money very easily these days. And
you've recently raised some money, haven't you, Andy? It was 6 or 7 mil.
It was 7 mil in the last round, and another 3, I think 3.5 earlier in the year. So, basically, we've raised $10 million between when COVID started and now.
Okay. So where are those funds going to be going? Because I guess that's something that current shareholders and future shareholders would like to know.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, well, so the simple answer is with Boda, we call it Boda East. It's the actual little southernmost arm of our Yarrandjeri tenement. The project Boda East, we've recently had approval to do up to 14 holes there, and we're currently drilling. I mean, most of your readers, if they follow our story, they'll know that. We're currently into hole 5 as we speak. And in relation to hole 1, there's some interesting stuff that came out of that we did announce. There was some visual chalcopyrite that we made a small announcement about when we saw it. We thought that was prudent. Those results will be coming out later this week on the first hole, so that's going to be exciting. And then, yeah, so the money, so up to 14 holes there at Boda East.
How deep is that, Andy? How deep are you going?
Well, most of the holes so far have gone between 700 or 800, so they're pretty deep.
Yeah,
and as John Holliday pointed out, they're pretty expensive. So, so that's, you can do the sums on that straight away. I mean, these holes are not cheap. They're probably off the top of my head, a couple of 100,000 per hole when you're doing 1,000 meters. So, so we've got up to 14 to do there if we want to. We'll see how we go up to hole 5, which is, we're feeling pretty good about what we're seeing. But so it's, as I say, it's high risk, but high reward drilling. And then we've got another 8 holes up in the Mendooran tenement, which is just north of here, which again are John Holliday Newcrest generated targets. And then we've got, as I mentioned earlier, in relation to Horn Island, we've done a little step out program in terms of our resource. That was 6 diamond core holes. Results from that are going to be coming in starting probably in a week or two. And then, as I mentioned earlier, in terms of the resource itself, we're going to do an RC infill program to try and beef the resource up from the inferred category through to indicated to build that value for the partnership that hopefully will result with St Barbara. So we've got a lot on the plate. It's all happening.
You have got a lot going on at the moment, Andy Buxton, and you know what? You've done your homework. You've done the hard yards. You've got John Holliday, who as you said earlier, he was one of the people that founded Cadia, and he's convinced. But you got to go deep, and it's one of those things that I wish you all the best with it. And I guess we're going to be talking again in a few weeks' time, because as those results come out, I'm sure our listeners will be very keen to see what your thoughts are on those. Any final thoughts for our listeners today?
I think just watch this space. I think, the main thing here is that we've got news flow for the first time in the company's history. We've got really good positive news flow coming from both projects consistently from this point on right through probably into January of 2021. So it really is a case of watch this space for the next 3 or 4 months, I reckon.
Ladies and gentlemen, the very excitable Andy Buxton from Alice, Managing Director, Alice Queen, ASX code, as I said before, AQX. Andy, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks so much, Kerry.